At the beginning of April, I decided I wanted to make more beds. So I got my boyfriend to buy me some wood and I painted the planks a nice green color. And then we assembled them at the allotment and created 4 new beds on the pergola side of the garden. Unfortunately, we did not have enough homemade compost to fill them, so I ended up having to buy 2 cubic meters of soil to fill them up. It was a bit of a mission to bring all that soil to the allotment, but we got there in the end and they looked pretty good. In April, I also ended up planting out some onions, so I took a few varieties and then I planted them in rows in this bed, and I interplanted 2 rows of carrots in between. April was also quite warm, so my sweet peppers and my aubergines were really big, and I decided to plant them out in the garden, which probably was a mistake, but most of them survived in the end. I planted about 15 little plug plants of chard, and I really liked how the colors of the roots match the leaves. My tomato plants at home had gotten super leggy, so I decided to just bring them to the allotment and plant them into pots and put them in the greenhouse, because I felt like if I waited any longer, they would have gotten so leggy, it would have been useless to plant them out. The plants were so leggy, I decided to bury most of the stem into the pot so the roots could grow out from the main stem and create more support. All in all, I planted 24 tomatoes in pots for the greenhouse for this season. These were leeks that I had planted the previous season and they had overwintered. And randomly one day I found a giant morel next to our compost bins. Unfortunately, it was way too old to have a taste. Usually every year I get hyper-focused about growing a particular thing, and this year's hyperfixation was beans. So in the winter I bought a whole bunch of different varieties of beans and decided that this was going to be the year of the bean 2026. So I soaked a few just before I planted them out in the garden at the beginning of May. Every year I get about 100 volunteer poppies, and these were probably my favorite so far. My neglected little pond has been a favorite of the bees this season. It is constantly buzzing. My garlic finally succumbed to rust, which usually happens every year, so I decided to harvest them. I did try and do a little harvest vid, so here's a little bit of garlic ASMR. This is what the garden looked like at the beginning of April. And this is what it looks like now at the end of June. We've just come out of a week-long heat wave, so I hadn't seen the garden the whole week because it was code orange and we were not really allowed to be outside due to government warnings. So we had a storm the previous night and thankfully nothing was wrecked completely. But because of the weather being so hot and humid, the weeds have gone insane the last month. Despite the extreme heat, my plants have done pretty well. So you can see that's some red onion buds bulbing there. And I have some sweet peppers that are finally growing nicely. They did struggle after I planted them in April because it was way too early. And the rest of the garden is really, really messy. If you squint really hard, you might be able to see where I actually put plants, but a lot of it is weeds and a lot of it is volunteers. So you can kind of see there's beans on one side, volunteer calendula on the other. This garden bed was filled 90% volunteer flowers and weeds and 3 peppers. I planted a courgette where the garlic was harvested, and that is where I planted my onions, so they're doing pretty well. The rest of the garden is covered in. Every year I fight them, and this year is no different. The storm kind of flattened my potato plants in this particular bed, and apparently there is a pathway under that, but you can't see it because of the weeds. My plum tree is insane again this year. I have to find some time to thin it out because the branches are so heavy they now touch the ground, and that is quite dangerous. I don't want the branches splitting. The highest recording temperature in the greenhouse was 47.8, which is very, very high. Thankfully, I do have an automatic waterer for my tomatoes, so even though they look really overgrown, none really look dehydrated. And I really need to find some time to fix these up. But I do have tomatoes, and that is the most important thing for me. This year I've planted some sweet potatoes, so you can maybe make out the leaves between the weeds. And I completely forgot I planted cauliflower till I saw the cauliflowers ready to be harvested. Funnily enough, this is my first successful season growing peas. I have tried in the past and pigeons have eaten them. So this year I covered them and I finally have peas. This is my Sunday morning harvest. So I have 3 lettuces that almost were gonna bolt, so they shouldn't be too bitter. And I have a little container of radishes. They don't look too bad. I did wash them a bit. They're a little bit holy, but that's fine. Also got some cauliflower. These were discoloring and blooming apart, so just caught them just before they went a bit overripe. I think that's a little bit of sun scorch there, and I harvested with a dirty glove, so that's why there's dirt there. I have a few broad beans. Broad beans were not that great this year, but that's my fault because I did not plant them properly. I have a mix of tomatoes, cherries, so this is a Brad's Atomic Grape, and these are some shishitos from the greenhouse, and I have a little bucket of peas, and this pea is called Kelvedon Wonder, so that's not bad considering the heat wave we had just gone through.